So let's go over how to teach a foreign language. Like most things in homeschooling, you don't have to know a foreign language to teach it. You only have to know it the night before they do. So if you don't know what language to teach, you could just pick something that you think your kids would like. Or you could look to see what's available at the high school or college level around you. Or you could pick something common like Spanish or French. I didn't. The first year we worked on sign language. Then the next year we went to a co-op and I ended up teaching the Spanish class. So my kids were in there just because it was free. But I had taught myself Italian the year before, so I was always mixing things up. So the next year I said, I'm just going to keep it easy. I will teach them Italian and we'll just all only do Italian. But that was kind of a poor choice because no schools around here offer classes on Italian, even though there's a large Italian population in the greater area. And furthermore, the resources were really hard to find, so I had to make a lot of that. But whatever you decide, I will walk you through the process. So starting a language, you should get your student familiar with the letters and their sounds because usually they're different in other languages. So take a few days teaching them the alphabet. And hopefully you could find a song of this on YouTube because then it gets stuck in their heads and then they'll just learn it, which is why picking something common would be really useful. And then you want to focus on vocabulary. They're going to need a lot of words before they're going to be able to use the language. Now, in my experience, most people don't really know how to teach kids. They try to approach it like they're teaching grown-ups, which when grown-ups learn a foreign language, we want to use phrases because then we can travel to a country and engage in conversation. And that's the point that you want your kids to get to, but it's confusing to start off with it because a lot of times you're teaching them irregular verbs or different tenses. And so the things that you want to teach them about, like the weather or the date, aren't really useful for all the vocabulary words that you will teach them. So we'll talk about phrases in just a minute. Let's go over some ways to do vocabulary. Generally, you want to pick a theme. So you could give them 5 words if they're really little, 10 words for the middle group, and then like 15 or 20 words if they're older. So you could pick like animals or colors, whatever. And most people like to use flashcards, which is fine. But I like to print them with pictures instead of the English. So the pictures on one side, you could even do it the standard note card. I liked to do this because it was fun. And the reason why you want to do this is because you don't want them to translate. When you translate, you have to hold it in your mind and search like what is that word? And so generally you'll use some sort of mnemonic device to help you remember it. And this will really slow down your ability to speak another language. And one of the coolest things about learning another language is discovering that ideas don't always translate. For instance, in Italian, there's a specific word that means sky blue, but we don't have that specific word in English. And a lot of times you'll come up with this early on in a foreign language. And you can point this out to your student by saying, how would you tell a blind person what red is like? You know, that's a hard thing to translate. So here's some other things that you can do besides flashcards. You can use some real objects. So I like to start with fall things, usually some fall animals like a fox or a raccoon or squirrel, and I tell a story. So every time I say the word fox, they hold it up, and leaf, they hold that up. So I usually start with leaves because, you know, fall, the leaves are falling down. So we learn about colors, and we go out, collect leaves, and then we bring them in and we classify them by colors and by size and by shape. So we might learn like star or oval and those words. So then we make like a whole leaf booklet. So they just pick a few leaves, paste them in, and then we write a thing about it. So like, I am an oval, or I am red. That's what I teach them. And then a lot of times it's so cute. They draw like little faces on them. Or you can play a game where like, can you guess which leaf I'm describing? Another great thing is something like this, where you can have a dress-up doll. So you could actually have a real doll or use cardstock like this. And then you could tell them what to put on their bear and have them practice it that way. Another game that I've made is where I gave them Play-Doh and then they build the face, kind of like the game Cooties. So I have this dry erase dice. I wrote it with dry erase crayons, so that way it doesn't wipe off too easily. And so they would roll it, and then if they rolled diente, then they would have to pick a tooth. And I had all sorts of different objects. So I had, you know, googly eyes, different kinds of those. And I had things for noses, stuff like dried pasta. And I had cut out some foam teeth, different styles, like the sharp pointy ones and the flat ones. And then I had like streamers for the hair. And so they built the whole face like that. And then we took a picture of it. You can also use busy bags. So if you wrote like verde on one side, and so they would sit here and they'd be like, what was the color? Oh, I think it was amarillo. And they pull it out. No, I got it wrong. And so you can practice things that way. And the nice thing about this is that then you don't have to spend time practicing with them. This is something they could do on their own. Another thing that I've done is when we've gone over drinks, I had these little cups and I would offer them a beverage, and I had like soda and tea and coffee and milk and water. And so I would ask them what they wanted to drink in Italian or Spanish, and then they would have to say what it was, please, or please may I have, and then I would pour them some, and they just thought this was a great game. They sat there drinking, you know, ordering soda and stuff. We also usually do a lot of bingo, so I like to have a different column for each category, so I might do like colors, numbers, animals, fruits, vegetables, and we do different things like playing, you know, the X or the big picture frame or the love letter, where you have to get the L and the postage stamp. And so I keep a drawer of prizes. So besides that, you can also use worksheets. So I usually like to have worksheets where I print off one for the whole week and it gives us different sections. So I might have a section for vocabulary and then things where we match it up and different ways of doing that. So once they've gotten some vocabulary down, then the next thing is verbs. And I like to introduce verbs by sets, so usually introducing one type at a time. I write the verb on the board and we work on it that way. So for the youngest kids, I just have them learn how to say I. I drink, I eat. For older kids, I add in I, and then he, she, and it. And then at the next level, I do I, he, she, it, we, because it's the plural version of I, and they, because it's the plural of he, she, it. And then at the highest level, we learn all the you versions as well. And so you want them to catch the pattern. And the reason why I've started doing this is because I found that it really helps them to have confidence that they can use the language. Otherwise, it tends to get very muddy. And so this way, it's just, I found to be the best. And so we write on the board and we do out some examples that way. And then in my Spanish class, I had them keep a verb chart. So it would have like the English, the Spanish, and then the different conjugations going across. And so they could always go back to that at the beginning of their binder. And then you could do a conjugation page like this. I actually put that usually on my worksheets. So I make my own worksheets. So I have a conjugation box, and then I do a practice sentences. So that way the answers are right there. We go over this, and then they can do this on their own. Now, once you have those, then you can start practicing doing different things. And I like to use games and activities. So for vocabulary, we sometimes do vocabulary smash where they lay out their cards and I'll call out a word and they have to smash it and the first person gets a point. Or I've done this one where painting, I just gave them a blank page like this and they had to ask for one color at a time. And so we practiced dialoguing that way. They would have to say, please, can I have? Thank you. You're welcome. Another great thing is doing little booklets because then they can practice reading these on their own. So I did a version of Brown Bear, Brown Bear. I made one once about painting, about he paints, she paints. This was a funny one that I made once, Key and Dosa. Who wears a tuxedo, a penguin? Who wears a coat, a bear? Who wears a skirt, a fish? Who wears a sock? Snakes, because they have that similar pattern. Who wears a dress, a turkey? Get it, turkey dressing. Who wears a sweater, a duck? Kind of looks like that. Who wears shoes, a horse? Who wears a swimsuit, a frog? And this one's my favorite. Who wears pants? A dog. Get it? A dog pants. Sometimes we play like Uno. You can do colors and numbers that way. There's also a game where you play kind of like the game You're Lying, but it's like a clock. So everybody holds up their cards and you have to put down, the first person puts down ones. And so they lay down some cards and they have to say how many cards of that number. So like 3 ones. And if everybody agrees, then it just keeps going. But if somebody thinks that person's lying, then they have to pick those cards back up if they were lying. Otherwise, if they were telling the truth, then the other person has to pick them up. And the nice thing about playing clock is that then it gets you all the numbers 1 through 12, which is what you need for a clock. And then you start back over. So you go through the clock. So the first person does 1s, 2s, 3s, 4s, 5s, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And the next person starts over with 1. And the game ends when somebody gets rid of all their cards. Another cool game is, I've only got the English version of this. I don't think they even make it in another language, but very silly sentences. So the point is that you go all the way around the board trying to collect different cards. So I made the cards for Spanish class. So it's words like shiny, under, and so you collect the different colors and you put it on your game board. Once you have your game board filled up, then you can flip all your cards over, and then it will make a silly sentence like, the banana jumps over the moon. And the kids usually like that kind of thing. So, remember how I said about phrases were useful? So here's the best way I found for practicing that, and that's to approach it like calendar time. So just like when they were in kindergarten, and you want them to learn like dates and stuff. So I like to print up things like this, that way I don't have to remember it and it gives them a picture. So I ask them, ¿Cómo está? How are you? And they have to say sto, and then they pick an emotion. So we do this every day. And then I'll ask them, ¿Qué giorno è oggi? What day of the week is it? And then I might give them activity like, when do we go to church? And then we do the song, you know, Gennaio, Febbraio, Marzo, Aprile, Maggio, Giugno, all the way through. These are the months of the year, just like in kindergarten. And then I'll ask them specific things like, when do we go swimming? And if we haven't gone over that word yet, then I will just pantomime it, or I will tell them what that word means. Some other things that I've done is I like to keep vocabulary cards, and I print them, I put them on blue paper for masculine words and red for feminine words, and then I put our verbs in green. And so this way we can lay these out and practice sentences. And this also goes with our game here, so that way they already know how those are going to match up. So one of our daily things is I have a thing with their heads on it, and one person gets to pick all the clothes for somebody. And so we put on these different outfits, and then we build sentences with those cards saying what that person is wearing. So besides those things, you could also use apps to practice. So for younger kids, there's usually like Rocket Languages, or, you know, just type in whatever language it is that you're looking for. For older kids, I definitely recommend Duolingo and Memrise are the best ones that I've used. So there's a whole bunch of ideas. Two other things that I forgot to say. I've done relays where like I have them run across the room and I call out what they should put on. So I have a whole bunch of clothes, and so they, you know, have to put on all the clothes, and that's always fun. Or I've done like a waiter. So I give them like play fruits, and then I give them different actions to do. So chopping, I'll tell them to chop the apples. And so they have to take the fruit and put it on their chopping board and pretend that they're cutting it with a plastic knife, or wash it, and then we put it in a bowl to mimic washing it. And so we do different things like that with real objects, so that way they get that practice too. So I hope that that was useful for you. There you have it. It's not a big deal.